I smiled when my aunt called herself the caregiver. But the house was falling apart. "We're struggling," she said. Then I checked the account and realized someone was lying. I remember thinking, this doesn't match. Because if we were really struggling, the house wouldn't feel abandoned. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable. It felt wrong. The kind of cold that settles into the walls, like no one's been taking care of things for a while. My grandmother stood there in the kitchen, holding her mug with both hands, smiling like she always did when she didn't want anyone worrying. "It just takes time to warm up," she said. I nodded like I believed her. I didn't look at the thermostat again. I didn't point out the draft coming from the hallway. I didn't ask why the heater wasn't fixed. Because I was already starting to understand something I didn't want to say out loud. This wasn't new. Karen walked in a few minutes later, talking before she even set her bag down. "I had to cut things again," she said. "Groceries, utilities. It's getting harder every month." She said it like she was tired. Like she'd been carrying something heavy for a long time. And that was the part that made it confusing. Because she sounded believable. My grandmother nodded immediately. "Karen handles everything now. I don't have to worry about a thing." That line should have reassured me. Instead, it sat wrong in my chest. Because it didn't sound like trust. It sounded like surrender. I hadn't been around much since I moved to Seattle. Work picked up, life moved forward, and distance made everything feel simpler than it probably was. Karen was the one nearby. The one who stepped in after my mom died. The one everyone praised for holding things together. And maybe she did. Maybe that was the truth she believed. But being back in that house, something didn't line up. The next morning, I opened the fridge. It wasn't empty. That would have been easier to understand. It was just thin milk. A few eggs. Leftovers that looked like they'd been stretched too far. Not what you'd expect from someone who said they were making extra grocery trips. "Do you want breakfast?" my grandmother asked. "I'm okay," I said, closing the fridge slowly. Karen appeared right after, like she always did when anything related to money came up. "We're stretching things this week," she said. "It's just how it is right now." It wasn't what she said. It was how quickly she said it. Like she'd already answered the question before I asked it. I didn't push. I just started noticing. Little things. The hallway light that flickered for days and never got replaced. The prescription my grandmother said she'd pick up next week. The heater that somehow always needed just a little more time. None of it was big on its own. But together, it felt like something was being delayed on purpose. That was the part one couldn't ignore. Because I knew, at least roughly, what my grandmother had. A pension from years of teaching. Savings. An account my Uncle Robert had set up years ago when he worked as a bank teller. She wasn't rich. But she wasn't supposed to be struggling like this. That gap, that's what started bothering me. Not enough to accuse anyone. But enough to watch more closely. One night, we were sitting together going through old photos on her tablet. She liked doing that when I visited. It made her feel like everything hadn't changed so much. "Do you remember this?" she asked, smiling at a picture from years ago. "Yeah," I said. "That was before I moved." She tapped the screen again, trying to zoom in. And something else opened. A banking app. She froze. It was small. Barely noticeable. But I saw it. And more importantly, I saw the number. It didn't make sense. Not just lower than I expected. Wrong. Like something had been quietly draining it. She closed it quickly, fumbling just enough for me to know she didn't mean to show it. "Oh, I don't really use that anymore," she said. "Karen handles all of it." There it was again. Karen handles everything. I nodded like that explained it. But something in my head didn't move on. Because if everything was being handled, why did it feel like nothing was being taken care of? I didn't bring it up that night. I didn't bring it up the next day. But after that, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Back in Seattle, I work with numbers all day. Patterns. Trends. Things that don't line up. And once something doesn't line up, you start looking for where it breaks. Over the next couple of days, I started asking questions. Carefully. Not directly. Not confrontational. Just enough to see what came back. "Have you had any big expenses lately?" I asked casually while we were in the kitchen. She shook her head. "Oh, nothing like that. What about the account Uncle Robert set up?" A pause. Just long enough. "I think so," she said. Karen would know. Karen would know. Every answer led back to the same place. And the more it did, the more it stopped feeling like trust. And started feeling like control. I tried asking Karen the next day. I kept my voice neutral. "Hey, I saw one of the statements by accident. Just wanted to check, everything's okay with Grandma's accounts, right?" She didn't hesitate. "Yeah," she said. "It's just expenses. Medication, utilities, everything adds up." It sounded reasonable. If you didn't think about it too much. But the balance looked, I stopped. Her expression shifted instantly. "Looked what?" she asked. Lower than I expected. She crossed her arms. "Are you questioning how I manage things?" she said. "Because I'm the one here dealing with everything while you're living your life in another state." There it was. Not an explanation. A position. And for a second, I felt it. The guilt. Because she wasn't completely wrong. I wasn't there. I didn't deal with the day-to-day. But that didn't explain the numbers. I backed off. Just asking, I said. But something had already changed. Because now it wasn't just a feeling. It was resistance. And if everything was normal, why did it feel like I wasn't supposed to look too closely? I stopped asking after that. At least out loud. But by the time I left Madison and got on my flight back to Seattle, I wasn't trying to figure out if something was wrong anymore. I was trying to figure out how much I had already missed. I told myself I'd let it go. That maybe I was reading too much into things. That distance made everything feel worse than it actually was. But the problem is, once something stops making sense, your brain doesn't just drop it. It keeps pulling on it. And the more I thought about it, the less it felt like a misunderstanding, and the more it felt like a pattern I hadn't fully seen yet. So I stopped guessing. I started tracking. I called my grandmother more often, but I changed how I listened. I wasn't just hearing her, I was paying attention to what she didn't say. What did you have for dinner? I asked one night. Oh, something simple, she said. What kind of simple? A pause. Soup. What kind? Another pause. Chicken, I think. I didn't say anything after that, because it wasn't about the soup. It was about how unsure she sounded. Like details weren't something she held on to anymore. Or something she wasn't supposed to think about. A few days later, I asked about her medication. Did you pick it up? Not yet, she said. Karen said we could wait a few days. That didn't sit right. You don't delay medication unless you have to. And if you have to, there's a reason. I started writing things down. Dates. Conversations. Small inconsistencies. At first, it felt like overkill. Like I was building a case out of fragments that didn't fully connect. But then something happened that made it impossible to ignore. She called me. Not calm. Not steady. Shaken. They might have to delay fixing the heater, she said quietly. Why? I asked. Karen said money's tighter than she expected this month. That was the moment everything locked into place. Because now it wasn't just discomfort. It wasn't just inconvenience. It was basic living conditions being delayed for a reason that didn't match what I knew. After that call, I stopped asking if something felt wrong. I started asking if it made sense. And it didn't. So I called Mark. We used to work together before I moved teams. Same job, same way of thinking. He didn't react emotionally to things. He just looked at numbers and told you what they meant. Hey, I said. Can I run something by you? Sure, he said. What's up? I gave him everything I had. Income one knew about. Expenses I could estimate. The balance I saw. There was a pause. Then he said, that doesn't add up. I closed my eyes for a second. You're sure? I mean, I don't have every detail, he said, but based on what you're telling me, either there are major expenses you don't know about, or money is going somewhere it shouldn't. That was it. That was the confirmation I didn't want but needed. Because now it wasn't just me. It wasn't just a feeling. It was logic. I booked another trip to Madison that night. This time, I didn't tell Karen until I was already there. When I walked into the house, nothing looked different. Same cold air. Same quiet explanations. Same sense that everything was being managed without actually being taken care of. That night, I asked my grandmother if I could help organize her documents. Just to make things easier, I said. She smiled immediately. Of course, sweetheart. No hesitation. No suspicion. That trust made what I was about to do feel heavier. I went through everything slowly. Bills. Statements. Old records. At first, it looked normal. Then I started seeing it. Withdrawals. Small, consistent. Not enough to raise alarms immediately, but enough to matter over time. Then the transfers. Same pattern. Same intervals. And one account that kept appearing. Over and over again. It wasn't hers. I checked the name attached to it. It wasn't a business. It wasn't a utility. It was personal. My hands went still. Because at that point, it stopped being a question. It became a direction. I went through months of records. Same behavior. Same quiet movement of money. Not random. Not accidental. Intentional. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying everything. The cold house. The empty fridge. The delayed medication. And now this. By morning, I wasn't unsure anymore. I was deciding what to do. Karen walked into the kitchen while I was sitting there with the papers in front of me. She saw them immediately. Her expression didn't change. What are you doing? She asked. I need you to explain this, I said, keeping my voice steady. She looked down briefly, then back at me. It's expenses, she said. I've already told you that. That account isn't hers, I said. That's when it shifted. Her posture tightened. You went through her private documents? She asked. I'm trying to understand what's happening. What's happening, she said slowly, is that I've been taking care of everything while you've been gone. That doesn't explain the transfers. She stepped closer. You don't understand the full picture, she said. Then explain it. She didn't. She just stared at me for a second. Then she said something that stuck with me more than anything else. You think this is easy, she said. You think showing up once in a while gives you the right to question everything I've done? That was the first time she didn't sound defensive. She sounded resentful. And for a second, I saw it. Her side. The years she'd been there. The responsibility. The pressure. But then I thought about my grandmother sitting in that cold house. And something in me didn't move. This isn't about effort, I said. It's about where the money is going. Her expression hardened again. If you keep pushing this, she said, you're going to cause problems you don't understand. That wasn't an explanation. That was a warning. And that's when I realized something I hadn't fully accepted yet. She wasn't going to explain it. Because whatever the explanation was, she didn't want it said out loud. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't push further. I just nodded. Okay, I said. But inside, the decision had already been made. Because if she wasn't going to tell the truth, I was going to force it into the open. I didn't argue with her again. I didn't warn her. I didn't give her a chance to fix it. I went back to Seattle, and I reported it. I told myself it was about protecting my grandmother. That if I waited any longer, more money would disappear, more things would be delayed, more damage would be done. But if I'm being honest, that wasn't the whole truth. I was angry. Not loud. Not explosive. The quiet kind that builds when you watch something happen slowly and realize no one else is going to stop it. I filed the report online. Suspected financial exploitation of an elderly person. I included everything: dates, withdrawals, the repeated transfers, the account that didn't belong to her. There was a moment before I submitted it where I hesitated. Because once I did it, this wasn't family anymore. This was official. I submitted it anyway. The first week after felt normal. Too normal. No calls. No questions. No signs anything had changed. For a second, I thought maybe nothing would come of it. Then Karen called. I knew before I answered that something had started. What did you do? She said. No greeting. No build-up. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. The lie came out too easily. Someone reported me, she said. They're asking questions. About the accounts. About everything. I stayed quiet. Do you have any idea what that looks like? She continued. After everything I've done? I said nothing. Because if I spoke, I might say the wrong thing. Or the truth. If you're involved in this, she said, her voice lower now, you're going to regret it. The call ended. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. Not panicked. Not relieved. Just still. Like I'd already crossed something I couldn't uncross. A couple of weeks later, my grandmother mentioned that someone had come by. A woman stopped in, she said. Very polite. Asked about finances. What did you tell her? I asked. That Karen handles everything. Of course. That answer used to reassure me. Now it felt like confirmation of how complete the control had been. The investigation didn't drag out. Not because it was rushed. Because it was clear. The same transfers I found. The same pattern. The same missing explanations. Karen called again when it escalated. This time, she didn't sound angry. She sounded shaken. They're saying there are inconsistencies, she said. That I need to explain where the money went. I didn't answer. I've been taking care of her, she said. You know that, right? And that was the part that made it complicated. Because it was true. She had been there. She had handled things. But that didn't cancel out what else had been happening. You think this is fair? She asked. I still didn't answer. Because I didn't know how to respond to that. Fair wasn't the point anymore. The truth was, she wasn't arrested. Nothing dramatic. But she was removed from managing the finances. Completely. An external supervisor stepped in. Full oversight. Every account reviewed. Just like that. Karen wasn't in control anymore. And that's when things started changing. Quietly. The heater got fixed within a week. The fridge stayed full. Prescriptions were picked up on time. No more delays. No more, we'll handle it later. My grandmother sounded lighter when we talked. I don't know what changed, she said once. But things feel easier. I almost told her. I almost said it. But I didn't. Because she still asked about Karen. She's been busy, she'd say. I'm sure she'll come by. And Karen did come by. Just less. When we were in the same room, we barely spoke. No arguments. No confrontation. Just distance. Cold, controlled distance. She never accused me directly. But sometimes she'd look at me like she already knew. Or at least suspected. And part of me didn't correct that. That's the part one don't like thinking about. Because I keep telling myself I did the right thing. And maybe I did. My grandmother is safe. Her money is protected. Things are stable again. But the longer everything stayed quiet, the harder it was to ignore something else. After the accounts were reviewed, after everything was reorganized, there was still money left. More than we thought. Not untouched. But not gone either. And somehow, I became part of the system managing it. Not fully in control, but involved. Consulted. Trusted. The same position Karen used to have. I didn't ask for it. But I didn't refuse it either. And that realization didn't hit me right away. It came later. When things were calm again. When there were no more calls. No more tension. Just normal. I sat there one night, looking at a summary of the accounts. Everything organized. Everything accounted for. Everything under control. And that's when it hit me. I didn't take the money. But I took her place. I keep telling myself the outcome justifies it. That I protected my grandmother. That I stopped something that needed to be stopped. But I also lied. I went behind my family's back. I forced something into the open instead of letting it resolve quietly. And I stepped into the space it left behind. So now I don't know which part matters more. What I stopped. Or what I became after. Because from the outside, it looks clean. It looks like the right thing. But when I really think about it, I don't know if I ended the problem. Or just replaced it with a version that looks easier to accept. So I keep going back to the same question. Did I actually protect her? Or did I just learn how to take control in a way that feels justified?